called a Jack Tripper. When I like to measure dick pics, I'm a very big fan of the Sharpie for scale. FYI for those out there. Hi, thanks for being here, you guys. Are you having a good pride? Yes. So I put the bi in biological anthropology. I am an out and proud bi, mostly cis woman. I oscillate depending on the day. I've always been this, but I didn't always know this was an option. And by what I mean is, I grew up in the 80s, a simpler time, during a Cold War, when the Russians were in the doghouse, not the White House. Trump was just a racist slumlord, not a racist slumlord / leader of the free world, and I thought everything existed in binaries. I thought it was right versus wrong, Republican versus Democrat, VHS versus Beta, Alf versus ET. Alf always wins, guys. Don't fuck with Alf. He's never met a cat he didn't like. And straight versus gay. I thought you had to just sort of pick one. That is until I saw my first scrambled boob on the Playboy channel. Again, child of the 80s. We had the TV with the bunny ears, and what you do is you turn it to the Playboy channel and you futz with the bunny ears, and every 15 seconds you'd get that scrambled boob. And I remember this tingling feeling in my loins, and I was like, oh, this feels good, but it's also like, what's going on? I like boys, I don't understand. And this happened a lot, and finally one morning I was so addicted that my mom left the kitchen. We were so 80s and middle class, we had a TV in the kitchen, and I remember futzing with the bunny ears, turning it to the Playboy channel, and I saw that scrambled boob, and I looked at the boob, and I looked down at my plate, and I looked at the boob, and I was like, I prefer the scrambled boob to scrambled eggs. I'm gay, because there was no other option. And I was terrified because I was thinking, do I have to come out to my parents? I'm gonna get ostracized by my friends. I don't even like Subarus, but I might as well just buy one. And I just sort of suppressed it. I pushed it down. I pushed it down so much I remember going for Halloween as a sexy woman. For Halloween. What is a sexy woman? I took my mom's dress, or a skirt, and I put a belt on it, and I thought it was strapless and sexy. But a couple years later, in 1990, I was in my parents' living room, and George Michael's Freedom 90 was on the television. I am that old that I remember when MTV played music videos. And I was dancing to it, and I remember being equally attracted to the George Michael and the supermodels who were lip-syncing basically his coming out anthem. And I was doing, God knows, like the Roger Rabbit or the Cabbage Patch. And my mom walks in, and I'm like, oh my God, Mom, he is so hot. And my mom just looks at me dead serious and says, Natalia, did you know George Michael is a bisexual? And this was funny to me for two reasons. One, why does my mom know anything about George Michael's sexuality? And two, I'm pretty sure George Michael was not bi. I'm sure. God bless you, Janet Reagan, you got that one wrong. But in that moment, my mind was blown because I did not have to play the Sophie's Choice of sexuality. I could like both and everything in between. I was able to be myself. And gender was a little bit more complicated. I remember as a child, I was a tomboy, which meant I did boys' things, which we now know are just things. And I lived in a uniform of corduroy slacks, striped t-shirts, and a bowl cut. I basically was the Chucky doll, and Ernie from Bert and Ernie had sex, and then that would have been me. And luckily my mom was very much, she raised me gender neutral before that was even a thing. But she was called into a parent-teacher conference, and even though she wasn't very big on gender norms, she was very big on rules and misbehaving. And she was like, what has Natalia done? This is kindergarten. And my teacher looks at her and says, Janet, it's not good. Natalia only plays with boys. And my mom just looked at them and said, so? It was John, Jeffrey, Joseph, and Natalia. My mom's biggest concern was the missed opportunity for alliteration. She didn't give a shit that I played just with boys. And that went on. She introduced me to David Bowie, who, as you can see here, is the patron saint of androgyny. Rocky Horror Picture Show was one of my favorite movies, and it's still Sweet Transvestite is my song when it comes to karaoke. But cut to 30 years later, it's fall 2017, it's the height of the Me Too movement. Started by Tarana Burke, further championed by Mira Sorvino, Alyssa Milano, bringing down the Cosbys and the Weinsteins, basically giving their comeuppance. No longer allowing sexual predators to, have their way, unless you're running for president, and then that's just a line in your CV. But for me, what killed me was this old adage that was being said all the time, not just by MRAs and incels, which are just the hashtag All Lives Matter for the unlaid and angry, but it was said by people that were seemingly socially aware and thought themselves to be quote unquote woke. But the line was, boys will be boys. Basically, it's the biological determinism battle cry for bad behavior, which drove me crazy because it's basically just saying, hey, you can't blame Jeff for telling Denise she filled out those jeans nice while patting her on the tuchus. He's a man. He couldn't help it. But that's the thing, that he could help it. You can't blame Science Jim for being a complete and utter douchebag. Biology isn't the dick, you are. And that was my biggest problem. So, and the whole men are from Mars and women are from Venus, or if you're Trump, men are from Mars and women are from a moon that is also part of Venus. I'll never understand what is happening, guys. But no, men are not from Mars, women are not from Venus. Men and women and all gender identities are from Earth, you socially illiterate and science illiterate douchebags. It is absolutely infuriating that people will use science and this sort of biological determinism, which is the idea that basically our genes and biology determine not only how we look, but how we behave, is responsible for just behaving like a complete and utter jackass and being a predator. So for me, that has been a big part of why I want to get out there and talk about this stuff. And looking at whether, I like to look at biology versus behavior. Biology and behavior are totally different. They do not equal one another. Men and women, sure, they can be considered different, but a lot of things like, for instance, biology, the reproductive system is oftentimes looked at as, oh, they're so different. But let's face it, men and women, we have gonads. We have gonads. Some are on the inside, some on the outside. Some can take a pounding, others cannot. If you are lucky enough to have found the clitoris, you will know that it is much like a penis. It will get engorged with blood, and if you even get it really, really close up, like take a little microscope, you'll see it actually looks like a penis. It is literally a little man in a canoe. So, that's something. And hormones, males and females have the same hormones, just different levels. So you can't use that as an excuse to say, oh, we're so vastly different. And even as scientists that look at the male and female brain, it's hard to tell a difference. So there's a lot of ways that we get that confused. In behavior, we forget that humans are not just a biological species, we're a cultural species. But I've got some good news for you guys. We've created these sort of cultural gender norms, but because culture evolves a lot faster, cultural evolution is a lot faster than biological evolution, we can destroy these gender norms, and we are. So for those that are kind of, feeling uncomfortable about, the LGBTQIA activism that's going on, too bad. That tolerance train has left the station, and it is full blast going forward. And another thing that people have looked at is whether humans are the only ones that have gender constructs. Now, I study primates. I'm a primatologist. And a friend of mine who's a colleague has actually looked at whether or not chimpanzees, our closest genetic relative, actually have gender norms. They have sex behavioral identities, like for instance, males are seen to be more aggressive than females, but there's things like grooming that in the past they've looked at it and they're like, I don't know, I think this is just sort of ingrained behavior, part of biology, but they're finding that there's actually cultures within chimpanzees. And they looked at wild chimpanzees versus captive chimpanzees, and they found that the captive ones were having different grooming practices because the females grew up with one another and they were grooming each other more versus wild chimpanzees. This is about as academic as I'm gonna get. We're gonna get gross in a minute, don't worry. The ones in the wild, the female chimps leave the group, so they don't have the same sort of bonds as females in captive because they grew up with one another. So the females spend more time rearing young, honestly, than they do actually grooming one another. So there's this idea that perhaps chimpanzees can pass down this behavior. So the ones in captivity that are grooming each other more are going to do it more and more and pass it down further generations, sort of moving away from that wild behavior, therefore showing that yes, non-human primates can have some sort of genderized behavioral. Then there's bonobos. Who here knows about bonobos? Yeah. That was like academicism. Okay, so let's get to bonobos. So I used to be on online dating apps, and who is here on online dating apps? I'm not anymore, but I was, and I would put that I was a primatologist, and I no offense to the cis hetero men out there in the audience, but usually it was them that would send me the message saying, oh, you're a primatologist. Have you ever heard of bonobos? Which is akin to saying, like, oh, you're a gynecologist. Have you ever heard of a vagina? I mean, I would be the worst primatologist if I didn't know one of the main great apes. But it also is their way of saying, I want to have sex with a lot of people. Do you want to have sex with a lot of people? Let's have sex with a lot of people. But an interesting thing about bonobos is they settle a lot of their conflict with sexual behavior. And it's not just, hetero sex. I mean, it is, they do GG rubbing. It's female and female genital rubbing. And that's a way to actually form bonds. It's like basically go getting your hair done, grooming. It's just, it's like a handshake, but with your genitals. The males will do essentially penis fencing. That is it is actually the scientific term. I call it, sword fights. Same thing. So there is a wide range of behavior. In fact, like the way that they deal with conflict, oftentimes, like say if there was a banana here, and we were two chimpanzees, and like say for instance you're the chimpanzee, and we look at the banana, and we'll just start fighting to death, and once one of them's dead, the other one will grab the banana and run off and eat with it. Now, if there's two British guys, we come upon the banana, we'd bicker. It'd be like, no, you eat the banana. You've got low potassium levels. No, Gerald, I'm sorry. You take it. I know how much you love bananas. They were your favorite in the runs. You take it, and then they would argue indefinitely till one of them died. And then the chimpanzee that survived would come and eat it and run off, and it would be great. If we were bonobos, we'd walk up upon this banana, we'd make eye contact. We'd look at the banana. We'd make eye contact. And then we'd make love every which way to Sunday until we forgot the banana existed, and the chimpanzee would come back and take the banana. But my point is, men would always tell me, okay, this is the best way to live. Why can't humans be like that? Why can't we behave this way? And I'm like, well, you want to behave like bonobos? You want to be like bonobos? Oh, yeah, Well, did you know females run the show in bonobo groups? Oh, what? Yeah, no. They like run the show. They are the dominant one in these groups. I mean, they like, the boys are like mama's boys. And they're like, oh, I had no idea. And I said, yeah. So perhaps if you want to be more like bonobos, you should forget our emails and maybe elect a female for president. Thank you, guys.